On this episode of the Neutral Wisdom podcast, Satanist and Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley discusses Way of the Warlock number 5 and is joined by Welfare Fraud Investigator anonymous guest. You are listening to the Neutral Wisdom podcast, a podcast dedicated to passing on knowledge and experience from a satanic perspective, hosted by Satanist and Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley.
Greetings and welcome to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Satanist and Satanic Warlock Robert Shirley, and today we're going to be discussing Way of the Warlock number 5 from Magister Dr. Robert Johnson's book, The Satanic Warlock. Since this episode will deal with being productive, later I'll be joined by a Welfare Fraud Investigator who will share some of the more interesting ways people have frauded the system. I have to admit, things like this fascinate me. Some folks have what seems like the coolest jobs. And since my podcast is about tying satanic philosophy into everyday life, after all, we're just regular people who live by an amazing set of guidelines, I always like to hear how someone is able to apply their beliefs and philosophy into what they do. And since I'm really trying to make shows that I would want to listen to, I hope to do more like this in the future. I've said many times, both on this podcast and in my writings, that I'm a graduate of Magister Dr. Robert Johnson's Warlock Academy. I could go on and on about what a positive influence this has had on my life. Magister Dr. Johnson definitely has a way of naming the things you already knew and focusing you on things that need to be developed. Magister Dr. Johnson's book, The Satanic Warlock, serves as the ultimate reference for today's man. The basis and foundation of the book, at least in my opinion, is derived from Magister Dr. Johnson's 9 Ways of the Warlock, which is a guideline for the modern warlock. Although, much like with any of the other books in the Church of Satan canon, the information applies equally to all sexes and genders. One of the 9 ways which resonated with me the most was Way of the Warlock number 5. Warlocks produce rather than pontificate, create rather than crow. Pretty words, to be sure, and we'll take a look at them more closely in the essay for today's episode. But beyond the words, what does this Way of the Warlock say exactly? Simply put, being productive is the mettle of the Warlock and the Satanist. Everything we do, everything we are is the result of being productive. We create art, poetry, literature, music, film. We excel in our careers and personal endeavors. We realize that we must create and put forth our best efforts to be productive, and that we benefit from our products or creations. In fact, if you can find me a Satanist who became their own true self and found success by sitting back and doing absolutely nothing at all, please let me know. I would love to have that person on the show. But on the subject of doing nothing at all, I spent a lot of time in my youth doing exactly that. Nothing at all. I wish I could get my 20s back, if for no other reason than to actually do something with that time. I have no idea why. I suppose I could blame a variety of factors, like my lack of guidance, awful parenting, lack of ambition. But that wouldn't be taking responsibility for my own actions, would it? Nope, that was all on me. I didn't realize I was the one who was supposed to make these decisions, and more importantly, take the actions required to make them happen. Now, to be clear, I wasn't one of those failure-to-launch types who took up residence in his mom's basement. I was more of a my minimum effort is my minimum acceptable standard type of guy. I've known a few of those basement dwellers in my day, too. If I had to do something that required more effort than I was willing to give, why, I would come up with every conceivable method in the book to get out of it. I suppose you could say I was very creative even back then. If only I had focused that effort in actually accomplishing something rather than into being lazy and non-productive, who knows where I would have ended up today. All things happen for a reason, I guess. But truth be told, it doesn't prevent me from being judgy on the failure-to-launch types. Like all Satanists, I believe in a meritocracy and the stratification of society. Water will seek its own level, and we earn everything we achieve. But what about those who are capable of producing but choosing not to? What are they contributing to society or to their own development? Magister Dr. Johnson once stated in the Warlock Academy, if you're not producing, you're bullshitting. And I'm inclined to agree. If you're not being productive, you're simply lying to yourself. Perhaps you believe your own excuses about why you don't produce. Oh, I need the money. I need the support. Nobody believes in me. Maybe you believe that one day you'll win the lottery. I don't know. I don't know what drives you. Only you do. Hey, maybe you do need a little help. We all do once in a while, and there's no shame in asking. But you need to realize that you are the one that makes things happen for you. No one is going to do that for you. Before we bring on today's guest to talk about welfare fraud, and again, I'm really pumped for this, let's hear today's essay on this subject titled Produce, Create, Pontificate, Crow, an in-depth look at Way of the Warlock number 5. Warlocks produce rather than pontificate, create rather than crow. This quote, one of Magister Dr. Robert Johnson's 9 Ways of the Warlock from his book, The Satanic Warlock, was a trigger for me. I think that of all of the 9 ways, this is the one that really hit home. It was the light bulb moment that made me evaluate my life and current level of activity. At the point I joined the Warlock Academy, I was pretty much a slug. I spent a lot of my spare time in front of screens, watching movies, binging TV series, and playing video games, all just to pass the time until I had to go to work or mow the lawn, go to sleep, whatever. I wasn't really aware at the time that I was doing nothing to leave any sort of legacy for my daughter. In fact, I wasn't really even giving her a lot to talk about at my future eulogy. Yeah, he watched a lot of TV. He really loved his TV. Not really the most fitting way to remember someone, at least in my opinion. When I discovered Satanism, I was really impressed by the level of creativity displayed by a majority of the membership. These people always seemed to be doing something. Writing poetry, publishing books, producing film projects, acting, other creative projects. Like most people, I assumed they had a talent for their work and never gave thought to doing any of those things myself. Those kinds of things were for other people, not for me. But Magister Dr. Johnson's words really struck a chord with me. Produce and create? Create what, exactly? And I realized that all of these Satanists, these people with all of their projects, were creating. They were producing. I, on the other hand, was pretty much wasting my time watching the results of other people's creative efforts. All the movies, TV, video games, somebody created those. And what was I going to do about it? Because no one was going to come and do anything for me, that's for sure. Well, luckily for you, I've already written an essay about how I'm being creative these days. A face made for radio in my first book, Neutral Wisdom, Contemplations of a Satanic Warlock, available on Amazon.com. So I don't need to go into it here. Needless to say, I've since put my brain to better use and now do indeed produce. But what is producing exactly? What is being productive? What is creating? We create when we use our imagination or ideas to produce something. This ain't rocket science, kids. All of us have the ability to create and produce, whether for problem solving, communication, or simply entertainment. If you thunk it up and maked it, you have created and produced. And if you have created and produced, be proud of your accomplishment. You have the ability to literally make something from nothing, no matter what it is. If it didn't exist before you thought of it, congratulations. You've earned the right to crow a little bit, that's for sure. Pontificate? Crow? Well, if we carry on, then you do have the right to brag a little bit. Be cautious, however, that you don't boast too much, lest you be guilty of the satanic sin of counterproductive pride. But what about the words used in this way of the warlock? Pontificate, crow. If one is pontificating, they are emphasizing an opinion that matters to them, not to you. Unfortunately, most of the time their opinion is highly subjective because, of course, everyone's proud of their own work. For example, if I were to write a book, wink wink, and then constantly spout off about how great it is, how this is the definitive book written on how to live your life and how it will change humanity for the better, well, that makes me a pompous ass, doesn't it? Those are my opinions, and it would be pretty obvious that I think pretty highly of myself. If I were to brag about how great I am and how everyone should listen to me because I wrote a book, blah, 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 then I'm just crowing. In both cases, the net result ends up the same. People think I'm full of it, and that would discredit anything I had to say. I would develop a reputation for being an arrogant jerk-off, and that would no doubt follow me for a while. Remember, it's far better to let our actions and what we have produced speak for us. Let what you have produced do the bragging for you. Earlier, I explained my light bulb moment and how I was inspired to become more productive with my time and my life. I think that for the most part, a Satanist will have that same sort of realization. We realize that we are fulfilled by creating and producing something that will leave a little piece of us in the world, and that is immortality. And then there's the proverbial other side of the coin. Those who do not create or produce. Those who would continue on as I had been, wasting their lives away in front of a screen, reaping the benefits of someone else's creativity. Now note here that I'm not referring to people with depression or mental illness, or people with disabilities. I'm speaking of perfectly capable individuals making the conscious choice not to do anything with their lives. What causes such a state? Is it laziness? Lack of motivation? Excuses? Regardless, it seems that some folks are indeed being creative, whether they realize it or not. If, like me, some people put as much effort into being productive as they do into not being productive, who knows what they could accomplish? There's a lot of untapped potential there. In any case, that's their decision to make, I guess. It just leaves more room to be creative and productive for the rest of us. So, produce rather than pontificate. Create rather than crow. What does Way of the Warlock number 5 really mean? The way I see it, to be the best version of yourself, you have to use your gifts, skills, and abilities to express yourself, to create the person you want to be. You must produce something which will provide personal satisfaction and fulfillment for you. You must remain humble, but acknowledge what you have gained through your creativity. As self-aware Satanists, we know we are skilled lesser magicians who constantly create our environment and produce reactions in those around us to our benefit. And those who aren't, well, they can stay on the couch. Let's pause here. When we come back, we're joined by a very special guest for some discussion on this and welfare fraud. Stay tuned.
You are listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. For comments, questions or suggestions, email us at information@neutralwisdom.ca.
Handmade, all-natural, botanical perfumes, soaps, and ceremonial incense, sculptures and jewelry to adorn yourself and your other altars. All this and more await you at moonandsunemporium.com. Ritual perfumes and other occult fine art luxuries, created and curated by me, Priestess Sarah Josephine Clark, with tarot readings by Reverend Dr. Dylan Clark. moonandsunemporium.com.
And welcome back to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. Our guest today is a welfare fraud investigator with many years of service in her home state. I think this will tie in very nicely with being productive and creativity, since I assume she's seen a lot of creative ways people have tried to fraud the system. And for reasons of anonymity, we're going to go with the pseudonym today. So welcome, anonymous guest.
Thank you for having me.
It's about as creative as I could get. I couldn't really
come about where I was going to.
Yeah, I couldn't really come up with anything better than anonymous guest, so that's who you are, which is good considering the way, our announcer Jack says is at the top of the show. It just worked all around. So since we want to keep your identity under wraps for obvious reasons, you don't have to tell us anything personal about yourself, but why have you here? I want to hear about your job. What kind of professional background do you have? How did you score a cool job like this? And what kind of frauds are you investigating on a daily basis?
This civil service field, it's not like I had to have a lot of background in investigation or anything. You have to take the test, pass the test, and then kind of work your way up. You have to learn some of the other programs and work as a caseworker handling it's Medicaid, daycare assistance, SNAP or food stamps, and temporary assistance are the main ones. And you have to learn that first, and then you take an exam to get a promotion. And one of the possible spots to go into for a promotion is the welfare fraud investigation.
You went through all of those before you got to your current job?
No, I just did Medicaid and child support enforcement. And then I took the promotion. And you have to then, if you didn't work in those other parts of the agency, you have to learn about it. go to trainings, you go to, like, there's a week-long institute when you first become an investigator in our state, my state, and that gives you some of the background. And then there's monthly statewide, or not monthly, yearly statewide conferences where you learn more, you hear from other departments, other agencies, district attorneys, things like that. And then there's another yearly training that's a 1-day instead of a 3-day.
Okay,
So-
and did you have a college background, or did you study social sciences, or can anybody who goes into the civil service kind of move into this career path?
Anyone really can. You have to and again, it varies per state. I don't know if in each state there are different criteria, but the state I'm from, you have to have an associate's degree, pass the test to get in the door, and then you can move up.
Wow. Okay, that's totally different than civil service where I'm from. It's to be doing something at the level that you're doing, you have to have like a social science degree or something along those lines, to get ready to work with the people. So as an investigator now, I want to get into the meat of what it is that you're investigating, because as we talked about before we came on, you must have seen all kinds of crazy stuff about people committing fraud. So
Yes.
are there different kinds of welfare fraud that we're talking about here, or are we determining that fraud is just a way to cheat the social system?
There are different types of fraud. There's different levels of fraud cases. So like you can have basically an internal, just giving someone an overpayment. That's just what they term it as, is there's a preponderance of evidence that someone lied or just didn't disclose information, somehow made themselves eligible when they really weren't. Then there's internal hearings between the agency, the client, and a law judge, and that you have to have clear and convincing evidence. You have to present the case. The client can then present their defense. The judge reviews everything and determines if they did commit kind of intentional program violation, is what it's called. They intended, they meant to do it. And then in that case, they're disqualified for a period of time, plus having to pay back what they got. If it's even more egregious, there can be criminal prosecutions, because welfare fraud is a felony. If it goes over a certain amount, a certain number of years, the assistant district attorney gets involved, the sheriff's office is involved, they get arrested, there's a trial or a plea.
So what level are you involved in, or what type of case are you involved in, or do you take them all in?
All of them, all of them.
Wow.
So
And
everything, yep.
holy moly.
Everything
Okay.
for the whole county, anything to do with the social services system. And every allegation, it's just that at the first start, it's an allegation. You could find out they weren't hiding anything. Or you could find out they've been doing it for years and,
So allegation. So that's where it kind of starts. So how do these cases come to your attention at your office? Is there a snitch line, like a telephone line people can call? Is there a general email that somebody can send to bring it to your attention? How would a case come across your desk?
all of the above. There can be, with the social services, it's broken down there's some programs that are strictly federal. There are some that are a mix of federal, state, and county. So for the ones that are strictly federal, and that's the food stamps, there's a nationwide hotline, there's nationwide websites. There's also, in addition to that, for every program, there's a state hotline, there's a state email address, there's a state address you can send stuff to. Because we get stuff from the Office of the Attorney General, they get complaints and then they send it down to us. The federal government gets complaints, sends it down to us. Or people can come right into the county office. They can handwrite a letter, they can call my unit directly and talk to somebody. And then the caseworkers who are handling the cases can say, hey, this just doesn't make sense. Sue Smith over here told me she's renting from Joe Bob over here, but Joe isn't saying that he's getting any rental income. So then the two workers talk and send it up to us.
And that kind of leads me to ask a kind of an offshoot question, is what kind of people are making these kind of calls? Are they vindictive people? Are they honest people that don't like to see the government defrauded? Is it sometimes a personal thing? Are there a lot of false accusations? Like, who's using these snitch lines, if I was to use that term?
We do get ones that are vindictive exes or, pissed off landlords or disgruntled employees and employers. And then we get people that are just fed up with hearing their neighbor boast about, I get SNAP, I get HEAP, but they see the husband drive in with the Mercedes every day and they live in a $400,000, $500,000, $1 million house. And they're like, you shouldn't be getting any government funds.
That's unbelievable. Sorry, I'm trying to picture that. Like there's people actually taking funds from the government and living that particular lifestyle. And that's
Yes.
some of the cases that you'll see.
Yes. Yep. I've driven up to houses to go investigate, and the apartment on the property has a spiral staircase. And it's like they feel they need government funds.
Wow. Okay. So you kind of led into my next question. So you drive up to investigate. So what's involved with an investigation? And it sounds like you become personally involved sometimes in a face-to-face type situation. You'll go and you'll look at things or you'll talk to people. Do you deal with a lot of files and documents, or is it more interactive for you?
They always start out with the file and documents. We try to see whatever we can with the paper evidence, because it's a financial crime. So when you go in before any judge, whether it's for the internal law judge or the actual judge with a prosecution, you have to have physical evidence to present. So it starts with the paperwork. Sometimes you can disprove the allegation just by the paperwork. Someone calls up as vindictive saying, well, so-and-so lives with her husband and he's buying all this stuff for her. You find him that he's been in jail for the last 10 years. Obviously, he's not buying the stuff.
Obviously.
Maybe it's a boyfriend, but if it's a boyfriend, it doesn't make any difference if they don't have kids together. You can disprove some, and you want to be able to disprove it and get some evidence before you go out and knock on a door. A lot of, people aren't very happy to have civil social services knock on their door, and
I don't even need to ask questions. You just kind of move from topic to topic here, which is fantastic. Because my next question was going to be, tell me about some of these interactions that you go on. Are they largely confrontational? As you said, I'm sure nobody's super excited to see anonymous guests at their door
Nope.
asking them questions. So does it move towards violence? Is there a lot of aggressive discussion? If we were to tie this back to Satanism, how much lesser magic do you have to use to kind of get the information that you're looking for?
There have been certainly confrontational, angry clients, confrontations. Thankfully, nothing has gotten violent. I'm pretty good at diffusing the situation and making it as not like it's not pushing, it's not confrontational on my end, it's not accusatory, but making sure I'm trying to protect myself and little things so they don't feel as threatened by me. Like it's that I'm just here to understand. I'm not here to prove that you're doing it wrong. I'm here to find the truth. Show me what the truth is. And you get somewhere with that.
I'm from the federal government and I'm here to help you.
Well, it's just a lot of it that is. That's how you spin it. It's that little bit of charisma of saying that, we're just trying to make sure everything's accurate and truthful. And then sometimes you let them talk, and sometimes they hang themselves. Sometimes they're really good at it and don't slip up at all.
Again, from a lesser magic perspective, do you prepare for your visit in terms of studying ahead of time? Like, I'm going into this neighborhood, I should dress and kind of deport myself in a certain way? Or do you take a standard approach with everybody as the government official here to ask some questions?
Certainly, if I'm going in the field and actually knocking on doors, I'm conscious of my attire for practicality purposes. We don't go out with the backup. It's just me knocking on the door with my badge and my clipboard. No weapons, no police escort, no second person unless we know it's a dangerous situation. If we know that this person, the person that we're trying to see if they're living with them just got out for attempted murder, we're going to make sure someone else is there. It's not going to be just me saying.
Ignorant Canadian question then. Since y'all American types have the personal carry rules, you can all carry firearms. Are you allowed to carry personal protection when you're doing your job?
No.
You're
Nope.
not. Okay, so there is a
Nope.
separation there. And that was
Yep.
just a silly question for me because like I say, that's what we think up here is you guys you're all packing. So I was just curious if you were able to. So when you go into these different neighborhoods, have you ever gone into some really sketchy neighborhoods and been concerned, or is it mostly the higher end things like you mentioned earlier?
Definitely sketchy neighborhoods. In my office, they kind of have the running joke that I don't have that self-preservation and, the lookout dog at the corner store that they're selling drugs and different things. I go ask to pet the dog. So,
And they obviously don't know you very well either, do they?
no. Well, my direct coworkers do. They know.
I think I've spoken to you enough times now that I got a pretty good vibe for it. I don't think you have much of a problem going and speaking to anybody. At least that's not the impression I get. I mean, you keep talking to me, so you're a glutton for punishment as well, I guess.
Took that risk.
Exactly. Here's a weird question for you. Now, I've mentioned many times that I'm a conflict resolution guy, and I wrote a chapter about it in my book. When you go on your visits or your investigations, do you take your cases personally? Like, do you get affected by the things you see? Or do you go home at night and sleep just fine because they're them and I'm me and I don't take that home with me?
Well, I sleep fine at night about it. I can't say it doesn't affect me. It doesn't make me agitated in some cases, empathy for others. Because, you see all sorts. You see the ones where it's a dilapidated trailer that is falling apart and there's 5 kids and a disabled mom. You see the horrible things and you see the people that are frauding just because they feel they want the better stuff. So it's hard to deal with. It's hardest when you have a case where someone who is not being 100% honest because they're really struggling. Their kids are really in need and the income levels are so low. You can't feed a family of 6 on $500 and $100 a week, or whatever the figures are. But you have to do the overpayment for them. You have to get the disqualification because you have to apply the rules uniformly, but you just can't prove that the corrections officer wife is still living with the corrections officer that's making 6 figures. They're good enough about hiding it. They make sure all of his documents and all of his stuff is in a different city, so you can't prove it. That's aggravating. It makes the job hard to keep going for too many years without letting it get to you.
That's an amazing perspective for me because when I ask that question, I always think of that question in terms of I'm mediating or resolving conflict between 2 people and I'm divorced from the idea that this is them. This is them. This is their thing. I don't care about it. I never actually, until you just said what you said, thought about the human side of it. And there has to be a big human side of it in what you see. Like if you're going into some of these places and you're seeing children who are obviously neglected or they're hungry or how does your heart not just break over something like that? For me, I'm an insensitive asshole, but I don't even think I could do that. You've got to leave and you've got to go back to your office and you're leaving them there like that. Like that's got to be tough.
It is. And, any of the people that work in social services, they're mandated reporters. So if you see something that's actually abuse or neglect, you have to call to a Children's Protective Service hotline so that the people have the authority to investigate that type of scenario. They're the ones that have to have the degree in social work. They're the ones that are hands-on with families, mandating to treatment, mandating to programs, going in to potentially have to remove children from a dangerous situation. That I couldn't do. I don't think I could manage walking out of a situation knowing that I couldn't prove something that I know in my gut is happening.
So who do you talk to when you come out of a case like that? Do you come home and unload on your partner? Do you have a crying room in the office? Do you have any kind of employee assistance to help you work through those things?
There are employee assistance things out there. Most of the higher ups have like an open door policy. I'm incredibly lucky with the unit I am in. It's small and we are all friends as well. We can come in and unload about anything, personal work, and there's no judgment about all the stuff that you have to unload. There's not the animosity and the bickering that you see in some offices where people just don't mesh.
Thank you for that alternate perspective, because it was not one that I had before I talked to you today. Probably because it's not something that I've ever had to think about. That's one of the things I love about having different people on this podcast, is that they bring that extra perspective in that I may not have thought about. As a Gen Xer who's just writing from my own slanted perspective, there's a third side to everything. So I do very much appreciate you bringing that to the discussion today.
And that's the third side perspective is what I try to bring up a lot of times when we're bouncing cases off of each other in my unit. Because you have different people from different perspectives, and someone might say, no one would shop with a 2-year-old at 10 o'clock at night. And I'm like, how do you know someone won't shop with a 2-year-old at 10 o'clock at night? Maybe they're working second or third shift. Maybe that's the only time they don't have, they have a car because they're sharing a car with somebody. You can't go just by your own perspective. You can't always even say there's no fraud or there's a blatant fraud. There's sometimes in the middle. Maybe they just didn't know. Maybe the first time they've ever applied on assistance, they don't know what they're supposed to report and what they're not. Or someone told them the wrong advice. You have to look at everything, not just black and white.
That third side perspective goes beyond face value and beyond what your personal position or opinions on the situation are. There's always that third side, and kudos to you for being able to recognize that and to see it and to call it out. And that's one of the things I think that Satanism does for us, is it allows us to be open to that third side. So I see that it's really kind of brought an extra layer to your work performance.
It has. It definitely, I mean, it did from the beginning. And even, I said, when I worked in child support, you have to look at it. It's not just a good custodial parent and a deadbeat that we're having to collect on. It's not that black and white.
All right. Well, so you've done your investigation. You've talked to people. You've processed all your files. Now, you touched on it briefly before, but what are the outcomes of a welfare fraud investigation? So you touched on 3 different types of cases. Just a little bit more detail onto what the outcomes are for the 3 different types would be some great info.
Well, obviously, sometimes it's unfounded. There isn't enough evidence to do anything with it. Then there can be, if it's a straightforward just overpayment, that could be anything from there's an agency error, a caseworker didn't do the right thing, someone got benefits they shouldn't have, to all the documents that they submitted, none of it was false. There's no false testimony. But they started getting some sort of benefits. Then they got a job making $60,000 a year and didn't bother to tell us until a year later. Well, they didn't actually submit any faults, anything. There's no evidence to give to a judge, but they still have to pay the money back. And that's basically, if it's paying the money back, there's forms they have to sign. We ask them to sign different repayment agreements. And for some programs, like I mentioned before, SNAP is all from the federal government. If you have an overpayment, regardless of why, they can take your taxes, they can garnish your Social Security, they can garnish wages. It's the federal government, they have their hands in everything. County government doesn't have quite as much of a reach. So if it's a program that doesn't have that federal funding, we still try to get the payment arrangements. We can still go through court to get wage garnishment and stuff. It's just it isn't automatic. When I had mentioned about the intentional program violation, that's where it's the same overpayment. It's a longer period for some of the programs. Like for just an honest mistake, for some of the programs, you can only go back a year. For others, you can go back longer. But for an intentional program violation, for that program, you can only go back a year. Now you can go back 6 years, and there can be 6 years worth of money that someone has to pay back. With that, there is basically a court order, so you can go right to small claims court and get a judgment if they won't sign it. And then they're disqualified from the program for a period of time. And it can be anywhere from 6 months to permanently in all 50 states and territories for the rest of your life. And then the prosecution, it's the same penalty, but added into that is the criminal charge and possibly probation while you're paying off the overpayment that you have to pay back.
That's not worth it. You're going to get caught eventually. That leads me into my next question. You provide such natural segues. I really appreciate it. But without going down any kind of a political road or a political viewpoint road, I have this question for myself. I'm sure that there are probably other listeners out there that would have this question. So why would somebody actually seek to deceive welfare? It's a social assistance organization meant to help people who need a little push to help themselves get going again. Now, I'm noting that I'm pretty ignorant of this system. So that definition is how I see it. And if I'm wrong, I'd be happy for you to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a little bit too much of a big C conservative viewpoint, or is my viewpoint skewed? I would love a little bit of clarification on that from someone who's working in it.
I don't think it's skewed. It's meant to be either that help up and help to get you on to something better if you have a rough patch in your life. It's also meant to help people that have some sort of inability to really bring themselves up to a minimum standard of living. It's not, that you're going on vacations and you have the newest car. It's that no one's going hungry. The heat isn't turned off on a negative 20-degree day. There's a shelter that's adequate, not like a 4-story house, but a shelter that's adequate, not falling apart, that you're a minimum standard of surviving for the whole household, whether it's a single individual or a family. A lot of people, it's greed more than anything. There are people, again, that if the standard is so low, they're fudging numbers or not saying certain things or trying, because even with all the assistance, they're still struggling. They still don't have adequate food. They still don't have adequate shelter because the government standards are very low. And especially everything increased since COVID. It's just the reality. The price of everything is going up. The standards and the amount of assistance haven't gone up with the inflation. But there's a whole bunch of people that they want more than they can afford, and they just want to get any money where they can. A lot of times you'll see a stay-at-home parent who's living in a house that's owned by the other parent that's working. The cars are in their name, all their bills are getting paid by the other parent, but they don't live there. The other parent lives somewhere else. They still live with their mom in a 1-bedroom apartment while the parent with the kids getting the assistance is doing nothing and getting all the money. That's just greed. If you have someone making enough to support the whole family, but you want money too.
Yeah, and I think that would be the kind of thing that would probably aggravate you, when you see obvious cases of intentional fraud where it's absolutely not necessary to have that extra support from the government. And as a Satanists, we're very big on being productive and contributing to society. And I find it interesting because we believe in stratification. What level are these people at?
Yeah.
They're being deceptive in trying to be at a higher level than they are by ripping somebody off.
Yep. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of self-employed that, they write off just about everything. They're trying to say they make no money. Well, you wouldn't be doing it for 20 years and it's a family business if you're making $10,000 a year. That's not realistic. We saw a lot, I brought up COVID before, where people were used to making a lot of money, doing well for themselves. We had a lot of influx that we're still trying to sort out. To them, they're poor, going from, making 200, 300,000 a year to unemployment of 450 a week. Now they're poor. Maybe they're not by the standards of government.
It's the perspective, right? Like the individual perspective. Hats off to you for being able to do what you do. I don't deal with the public. I think it's pretty obvious from my writing that I could not deal with the public. I don't have the patience to do it on a regular basis, and especially seeing some of the things that you see You keep it.
Yeah.
And we need people like you in the world, that's for sure. So if we're going to go out on a higher note, if this is a higher note, can you share any of the more creative or unusual cases that you've seen? So, like I say, with regards to being creative, these must be some pretty creative people. Like in my job, I've seen some pretty elaborate schemes where businesses rig the system in their favor for certain things.
Mhm.
Do you see some creative people doing some creative things? What kind of stuff do you see that you can share?
We certainly see people, like there are forgeries, obviously. There's actual pay stub generators that you can find online, and they make their own pay stubs
Come
and their
on.
own wages. Yep.
Wow.
And usually there's a slip up somewhere in some figures, like the math doesn't math, it's the year to date isn't matching up from paycheck to paycheck, or they don't think you're going to call the actual employer. There's a lot of that hot potato with different businesses and corporations where once you find out the one person is running the business and getting the self-employment from that, all of a sudden that business dissolves and now the brother's running it. And then you find that one and find out who's running it, then that dissolves and the uncle's running it. And put a lot of effort into getting that little bit of extra money from the government instead of putting that same effort into growing the business even more. And I mean, there's larger cases that are involving multiple counties where medical transportation cabs are paid to bring people to visits for medical necessities. They're double billing, they're billing for other things, and it's a conspiracy between the clients that are getting the rides and the cab companies and the doctors. And I think one of those, it was multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that the state government's trying to take down.
Because doctors don't make enough money already, I guess.
Guess not.
Well, now you're upsetting me with this. So maybe it's best to stop here. Anything else about this that you would like to talk about, or any additional information that you might have missed in our conversation? Any advice for people out there who want to get into your line of work, people who think this might be a good job for them? And any warnings for people out there who might be thinking about committing welfare fraud?
As far as getting into the line of work, it's a difficult job, like we've already discussed. It's something, there are a lot of pros to any type of county or government job because there's more security. But the biggest thing for at least how it's run in my state, I again can't speak to every state, but it is not a meritocracy. And that for the fellow Satanists, I think that's one of the things that for me, it's making it hard to stay for too many years, knowing that it's based on how many years you've been there, how you do on tests. You don't get raises on merit. Promotions aren't necessarily on merit. It's hard to stomach that. But then on the other side, you do get lots of days off, holidays, good medical,
The
and
perks.
pension.
Yes, of course.
So, yep. But that would be just looking at how it's structured and how you get into it, into your actual local county or the county over, and weigh all the pros and cons. Once you're in it too long, you don't want to walk away no matter how bad it gets, because you only have a few more years to get that pension. I would just say, if you see the fraud going on, if you think about it, best thing to do is get on the computer, put it in your search bar, and like whether it's welfare fraud, social security fraud, find it for your state, make the call. If you're wrong, nothing will happen. If you're right, maybe you'll get someone to start. And I firmly believe if you catch them and if you can actually stop it, most people have potential, whether they ever use it. You start out when you're born with potential. If you stop them from doing this, maybe they'll get off their ass and do something productive and actually move themselves forward.
You'd have to ask them, have you ever considered using your powers for good? If you're that creative in not doing anything, maybe you could channel this in a more constructive manner.
Yep. And there are times I try to diplomatically say things like that. You just got to watch yourself, because you step wrong and there's the calls to the commissioner, there's the calls to the Senate, there's the
Yeah, you can keep it. You can keep it. Again, hats off to you. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for coming on this show and talking about work. I know you did it all day, and here you are in the evening talking about it when the last thing you want to do is keep yapping about your job. But I think this is great information. It really ties into being productive, being creative. I think that when we can hear the perspective of somebody who goes out and sees the results of people not being creative, it really puts a great perspective on this whole topic. And thank you again for coming on and talking about it.
I was happy to be here, and hopefully it entertains some people and informs some people in the process.
Well, I was definitely entertained. And if we ever have you back, we won't have you on as anonymous guest. How's that?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Thank you very much, and we will talk soon. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and a huge thank you to our guests and all of you for joining us today. Please drop a like or comment down below. For questions or comments, you can email me directly at information@neutralwisdom.ca. You can listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. A like and subscribe go a long way in getting this podcast out there. Check me out on Facebook under Robert Shirley, and check out Instagram at neutral_wisdom. And be sure to visit the website at neutralwisdom.ca. And don't forget, Neutral Wisdom, Contemplations of a Satanic Warlock, now available at Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle formats. Until next time, ever forward.
You have been listening to the Neutral Wisdom Podcast. For more information, email us at information.neutralwisdom.ca, Facebook under Robert Shirley, or Instagram at neutral_wisdom. Also check out our website at neutralwisdom.ca. Program copyrighted 2025. Devilish Gentleman Enterprises.